And you can't even drive? I can. Are you stupid, eh? Are you a stupid fool? Well, why can't you drive then? You can't even drive! A bit grey today, isn't it?
I'm here. Welcome yet again to the Deepest Lore. It is week 3 of Batman month. Thank you once again to the legendary Chuck Dixon for coming in last week. This week, we will be talking once again about the comics and talk about the deepest lore, ladies and gentlemen. We are dealing with one of the deepest lores of all. But before we get to that, and as I let the trucks trickle in, there they go. Choo, choo, choo. Choo, choo, choo. Before, as people are trickling in, a couple of items of news. First of all, my book, my brand new book, The Populist Delusion, has been released. You can check my community tab if you want further details on that. I am told that the first run sold out within 2 hours. 2 hours it was sold out. So if you've made an order and it takes a few days to come or a week to come or whatever, it is because the publisher has had to do a second run after the first run completely sold out. So get your order in as soon as possible. Order it from Imperium Press if you want to give us most of the royalties, not giving it to evil Globo Corporation Amazon. Secondly, obviously my Easter sale is still on. I will just mention that again. You use the code Easter25. It goes all the way until altogether now Mayday, 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 Mayday. So that's the code Easter25 off all my courses. Join the channel, buy a mug. Also, following this show, I make an appearance on Decameron Film Festival with Frody. If you want to go to that, you have to buy a festival pass. I believe it takes place on Telegram. If you want to watch it live, or you can catch up using Gumroad on. There's been some great episodes of that so far. I'll be talking about nuts in May, which means that there's a good potential this stream will go on for some time, ladies and gentlemen. So strap in your seatbelts, make yourself comfortable. Hopefully you've got a hot beverage ready. So that is at 7 p.m. And at some point I need to eat. So let's call it 6:30 as a hard finish to this stream, which means I've got approximately 3 hours and 20 minutes to cover 80 plus years of Batman lore. Is it possible? How am I going to do it? Well, we've got a number of different options. Either I can just take random questions from the I don't actually know how many copies of Populist Delusion were published. I have no idea. You'd have to ask the publisher about that. I don't get access to sale figures or anything like that. So where do I even start? Well, before we even begin, we need to make some delineations and some kind of boundaries, as it were. So obviously I'm not going to be covering any Elseworld material, okay? And obviously I'm only going to be covering the main modern continuity. And I'll explain what I mean by that in a moment. So I will not be covering anything in the New 52, none of the Court of Owls, nothing in the Snyder run, none of the new stuff, basically. So there's a hard finish somewhere in 2010, 2011. Also, I will admit, I have yet to read through all of the Grant Morrison stuff just because there's so much of it. So, in my own actual reading, I know what happens, but I haven't read those books because there's thousands of pages of it. So, yeah, I mean, people are saying post-crisis. I mean, yes and no. We'll talk about that in a moment. So, in the comics, there is the Golden Age, the Silver Age, the Bronze Age, and what is called the Modern Age. Okay, the Golden Age was the late 1930s, late 1930s, 1940s is the Golden Age. The Silver Age is basically the late 40s into the 50s. Okay, the Bronze Age is, let's say, end of the 60s all the way into the 70s, probably right up until like 1985. And then in the DC universe, which is what the world of Batman takes place in, there was this big event called Crisis on Infinite Earths that reset a lot of the characters and rebooted a lot of the characters. Most pivotally, Superman. I believe Superman started again. Man of Steel 1 started at some point in probably in early 1986 or late 1985. Okay. Now, the thing is with Batman, what makes this complicated is that when all of the characters were reset in the Crisis on Infinite Earths, Batman wasn't really. He kind of was, and he kind of wasn't. So really, a lot of things that happened before 1986, including almost all of the Bronze Age stories, and by implication, a lot of the Silver Age stories actually took place. To make matters even more complicated, in the pre-crisis continuity, there was an Earth 1 and an Earth 2. And the Batman that we knew in the comics, the modern Batman, that was the Batman of Dennis O'Neil and Neil Adams and Englehart and Rogers, that Batman was the Earth 1 Batman, and the Batman of the Golden Age comics was Earth 2 Batman. And if I'm correct, he goes off and like marries Catwoman and lives happily ever after or something. So the year 2 Batman was a completely different character. And so the Golden Age stories were that. But to make matters more complicated, writers at any point could bring Golden Age stories into the Earth 2, into the Earth 1 continuity whenever they wanted to, through little flashbacks. For example, when the Mad Hatter makes his big return in the early 80s, he all through the 60s and 70s, there was a fake Mad Hatter who had a mustache, the imposter Mad Hatter, and then the real Mad Hatter turns up and says, "Oh, I've been away for a decade, but now I'm back." And there's a little editor note saying, "Oh, he debuted back in Batman 49." So that by as if by magic, the writers brought a Golden Age story into the current continuity. Okay, anybody lost? Anybody lost? Right. So I will now explain how we're going to do this. Okay. So when the Crisis on Infinite Earth happened, there was a big story called Year 1 by Frank Miller, where all modern continuity starts. Okay, including, I believe, even the fucking post 52 stuff. There was this it's all very confusing. There was a rebirth thing, so all of the old continuity was back, but it wasn't. And just ignore modern. Just assume DC ends in 2010, and it just makes life a lot easier for all of us. Okay, so when Frank Miller's Year 1 happened in 1986, it is a retelling of Batman's origin story. You know the origin story. He's out with his parents, Thomas and Martha Wayne. They're going to watch the Mask of Zorro at the cinema. Popcorns and pearls. And of course, they're killed by a small-time hood known as Joe Chill. Okay, in the proper continuity. Okay, now, yeah, don't worry, you haven't lost. You people who are lost, just ignore everything I've just said. Maybe come back to it in like a year's time, and it'll make sense to you or something. We're starting with year one. Okay, we're starting with year one. His parents have just been killed. Okay, now what happens in the there's also a story called Resurrection Night in Batman 400, which also happens in 1986, a few issues before year one. Okay, and Resurrection Night is seen as the kind of final story for the Bronze Age Batman, and it's suggested that he goes off and has other adventures that we never see or hear of again. However, that's not quite true, because in the status quo of that period, if you were following the comics of that period of the mid 80s, a number of things were present in the status quo. For example, Robin was not Dick Grayson in 1986. This was, but another young boy called Jason Todd. Okay, and if you were just carrying on reading, apart from the year one storyline, Jason Todd, for example, continues being Robin. And for all intents and purposes, the stories just continue. The only difference is that we've got this new origin story, essentially retconning and making tidier the early Batman. Okay, so if you can imagine what DC did and what the Batman team did in 1986, is that they essentially started rewriting Batman's origins with year one. And they launched a book in 1989 called Legends of the Dark Knight. And they also started releasing special issues like The Long Halloween, Dark Victory, Batman Year 2, and things like that, which were specifically tales from Batman's early days. Okay. And in a lot of those Legends of the Dark Knight issues and other such collections from his early days, they retell a lot of the early, like Robin's origin story, a lot of the villains' origin stories, and so on and so forth. Okay, but at the same time, the actual ongoing continuity with Jason Todd as Robin was still continuing through all of this. Does that make sense? So effectively, you have these two different timelines: early Batman and current Batman. But the current Batman actually didn't look much different from the pre-crisis Batman. Press 1 if you understand what I'm saying. Hopefully that's not too difficult for everybody so far. They're essentially just retelling the early stuff. Okay. Press 2 if you're lost. Press 2 if you're completely lost, because I do understand it is difficult. Okay. Decent amount of ones. Okay. So to make matters even more complicated, the people who were rewriting the early stories could, by magic, reference stories from the Bronze Age and stories from the Silver Age, and thereby magically bring them into the modern continuity. I.e., that story that you read about back in, I don't know, Detective Comics 320 actually happened. It actually took place. And if you can imagine, the editor at that time was a chap called Dennis O'Neil, who was one of the main writers in the 70s. So he had a kind of interest to preserve a lot of the lore and the history that had already been told in the 70s. For example, Dennis O'Neil created a villain called Ra's al Ghul. There's some great trade paperbacks you can get from the 70s, like Strange Apparitions. And as if by magic, these are just referenced in the comics, and all of a sudden, if you want your origin story for Ra's, well, there it is back in the 70s. Does that make sense? So you had this kind of situation where anything in Batman's back catalogue was fair game to be brought into continuity by a magical flashback or a magical reference by the writers. Okay. Now we can move forward. So everybody knows Batman loses his parents. Then what happens? So you have he takes on a sidekick called Robin, and his name is Dick Grayson. Robin was a guy who worked in the circus, obviously as his faithful butler, Alfred. And the other major character that we meet in the year one stuff is Jim Gordon, who at that time is just a detective in the Gotham Police. In the comics, he comes from Chicago, which is a kind of fairly major plot point later on. That he's actually a Chicago guy, not a Gotham guy. And he makes a friendship and an alliance with Batman. Doesn't know his secret identity, but does have this situation where they establish the Batman flashlight, and they have meetings on the ceiling and so on and so forth. There is also a continuing like a kind of in joke in the comics, which I think they used in the Batman animated series as well, where Batman always like disappears unexpectedly in the middle of the conversation with Gordon, and Gordon's like, "Oh, I hate it when he does that." That happens a lot. Okay. Now I'm gonna pause here to see if anybody has any questions about this very early bit of Batman. Just like the year one plus Robin bit. No questions so far. Okay. Right. Good. We're doing good for time. So, from here, there's a couple of other key bits of lore that get established around this time as well. We're talking about stories that happen in the Long Halloween, in Dark Victory, and else. I will not be fielding questions like why is Dredd so much better. Not interested in such facile and juvenile debates. Essentially during the Long Halloween and all of these early tales, we start meeting all of Batman's rogues gallery. Okay, rogues gallery. And one of his early villains is a guy called Dr. Hugo Strange. We meet Jeremiah Arkham, who's not really a villain. He runs Arkham Asylum. We meet, the Penguin, the Riddler, Joker, etc. We just meet the classic rogues gallery. They're all present during Long Halloween, I believe, pretty much all of them. What else happens? Oh, and of course, we established this relationship with Catwoman, who in the comics is not really like a supervillain. She's more like she's a criminal. She's like a thief who does heists and things like that. But she's not really. She kind of has this kind of love affair with Batman, where they kiss on the roof, and she never really gets anywhere with him, etc. Okay. Yeah, Hugo Strange. Yeah, Hugo Strange. It might help if I actually pull up hold on. Pull up this reading order here, because it will help jog my memory as to what goes on. Yeah. Okay, so yeah, we get all these early stories. There's Robin, early encounters with Catwoman. Okay, so one of the other major characters who gets established early on is Barbara Gordon, who is Jim Gordon's daughter. Okay, Jim Gordon's daughter, Barbara Gordon. She's a redhead, and she becomes Batgirl. She becomes Batman's second sidekick alongside Robin. But what happened is there's a very famous story, and I might as well start pulling up covers at this point. I'm going to just hit some of the major changes to the status quo that goes on. Hold on. Oh, for God's sake, there's some. Yes, here we go. There's a famous story that takes place called The Killing Joke, which is a major. Hold on. Is that right? There we go. The Killing Joke, a major story that takes place. I think it was by Alan Moore and Brian Boland did the art. Very controversial at the time. It's never left continuity since it came in. I think it was published in 1989. Was it? The Killing Joke. When was The Killing Joke written? I'm just talking about major events that take place here. 1988. Okay, so The Killing Joke. The major thing that happens in this is that Barbara Gordon is shot by the Joker, and she loses the use of her legs and is confined for life in a wheelchair. Okay, now this is not really spoilers, because if you basically read any Batman comic from after this point, you'll see that there's a character called Oracle who's in a wheelchair, and that is Barbara Gordon. Let me just show you Oracle. Get some pictures up of her. She's in absolutely loads of the comics. There she is. There's Oracle in a wheelchair, and she is basically a kind of nerd. She's constantly she's basically like a kind of like a kind of constant a source of information. She's somebody for Batman to bounce ideas back and forth with. She's a point of contact between all of the various members of the Bat family. She's always on like speed dial to all of them, and she's basically got the internet, or super duper internet, even back in the 90s. So she's confined to a wheelchair, and because of this, of course, she hates the Joker, Batman hates the Joker, and Jim Gordon hates the Joker. They all have this reason to hate the Joker because she's stuck in a wheelchair now. Okay. Next major event that happens. So let's have a look. I think if we go like this, if I go on this sort of speed, we should be done in the 3.5 hours. They keep on making bloody movies of these things, so I can't. Getting the wrong cover. Hold on a minute. This. The next major event that takes place. Now, remember, I told you that Jason Todd is the Robin in this time frame. Basically, what happens is that Dick Grayson. This happens way back in the early 80s in the continuity. Okay, Dick Grayson grows up. He's over 18 years old, and for some absolute bullshit reason, Batman just fires Dick Grayson, or he quits, or I can't remember exactly how it happens. It happens back in the Jerry Conway days, like early 80s, like 1981, I think it happens. And he stops being Robin, Dick Grayson does, and he becomes Nightwing. Let me just show you Nightwing if you've never seen him before. Nightwing. Here we go. you can see Nightwing. Nightwing looks like this. That is the original Robin, Nightwing, as he appears in all the comics. Okay, he looks like that. That's his costume, and he has his own city to look after, separate from Gotham, which is called Bloodhaven. Bloodhaven, like that. And Chuck Dixon, who I interviewed last week, um, was a was a the inventor essentially of this place called Bloodhaven. He basically made this city from the ground up, and it was a place for Nightwing to have like separate adventures. So for most of the time, Nightwing isn't in Gotham; he's looking after his own city over there. Okay, and the Robin next to Batman is this Jason Todd character. Now, unfortunately, in the comics, Jason Todd, unlike Dick Grayson is a kind of happy is a he's a kind of more light-hearted character. He likes to have a joke around. He's good natured. He's not as like corny as um Burt Ward style Robin from back in the 60s Batman. But Dick Grayson does have a hint of that lighter side. And in fact, all the way through these stories, whenever Nightwing comes back, Bruce kind of remembers some of his Silver Age adventures with the first Robin, which are a bit more colourful. They're a bit more fun. They got on a bit more well. You see, occasionally Bruce smiled back in those days and things like that. Whereas by this point in his career, which is I think maybe 8 or 9 years in, now we have Jason Todd. Jason Todd is a bit of a delinquent. He's caught. I can't remember. I seem to remember him like stealing a bike or something, and basically he becomes Robin because he happens to like somehow find out Bruce's secret identity, or like he follows him back to the Batcave or something. So he's this like little scamp, this little imp, and he's a bit more disobedient than the old Robin was, a bit more cheeky, and he kind of moaned a good bit as well. So anyway, the readers, the DC, the Batman readers didn't really like Jason Todd, and in 1988 they did this audacious thing where they did a readers poll saying should in this story Death in the Family, which I actually reviewed all the way back on Deepest Law #1, I think it was. I mean, could be Deepest Law #3, but I seem to remember I read this with Mark all the way back then. They did a poll where they asked the readers basically should Jason Todd live or die, and of course the the comic book readers voted to kill him off, and they did. And there's a horrendous scene in here where you see the Joker with a crowbar basically killing Jason Todd. And this is one of the very famous front covers here. Jason Todd is dead. Okay. So that's what happens in Death in the Family. So not too long after that, we get a new Robin called when does that happen? When does the new Robin come in? You think he comes in straight away, doesn't he? Yeah, we go. Yeah, so we get a new Robin called Tim Drake. I'll just show you a picture of Tim Drake. We get Tim Drake Robin. This Robin here. I mean, and he is Tim Drake Robin is basically Robin for all of the 90s, and he's Robin for most of the 2000s as well. I'll say more about that in a bit, but he is Robin for most of the time in the comics. And Dick Grayson is Nightwing. And sometimes you'll see Tim Drake, Robin, and Dick Grayson, Nightwing team up as well. Plenty of occasions they They work together. So yes, he's not. I don't know why they've got this black kid there. He's not black. He looks like that basically. Okay. And there's yeah, he's not bi either. He's got like we see him having girlfriend. There's no suggestion at all that Tim Drake is either black or gay. Okay, he is not bi. I don't know what those searches were showing. There's not pause. None of that's like none of this stuff that comes up on the Google image search is in the comics, folks. There's no. He's not gay. He has a girlfriend, which I'll get to in a moment. He has a girlfriend called Stephanie Brown. We'll get to her in a bit, okay? But before that, there are a number of other major villains who are added to the canon. First of all, there's this guy, Zazz. It's worth knowing about these because they've been part of the lore for a very long time now. So, do you know what? Fuck Google. I'm going to use DC database to stop all of these paused results coming up. Zazz, hold on. Oh. All right, that's better. Having nonsense instead coming up. Okay, so this character here, Victor Zazz, is one of the new villains who comes up in the early 90s. I'm mentioning him because he's just around. You know, sometimes you so have a look if there's a character gallery down here. Here we go. Images of Victor Zazz. He looks like this. God's sake, all of these sites are bad. Character gallery. This is what I'm looking for. So you can see this guy Zazz is a bit of a freak. He has like a real compulsion to kill, and every time he kills someone, he puts he marks his body in this manner. If you see, so he puts a notch on his body to show that he's killed again. This guy is so dangerous that when he's in prison, they keep him like confined. They keep him confined in this kind of locked chamber. He's not allowed out because he's just a psycho, and he kills all the time. So he's one of the new villains who comes in. Who else? There were some other big villains who come in. Well, I guess the next one that we can talk about very quickly. This is a big event that takes place. So we'll talk about this. Is Nightfall, which is a huge story which introduces Bane. It introduces Bane. So there you can see Bane. You can see the famous front cover of Batman having his back broken across Bane's knee. And effectively what happens in Nightfall is that this new supervillain, Bane, helps break out all of the villains from Arkham. And they all, they basically wear Batman down over a series of weeks and months, because they're all loose at once. And then he has this big fight with Bane where he's tired and eventually he's overwhelmed. And this causes Batman to retire. It causes him to have to step down because he can't walk anymore. And instead we get a new Batman called John Paul Valley or Azrael. Now Chuck Dixon said last week that the original idea was to actually kill Bruce Wayne for a period. But anyway, we have this Azrael character, and they deliberately made him quite a disliker. He's a bit of a dick, to be honest. Um, but there's all sorts of interesting things that happen during the. So there's Nightfall, which is the story of Batman having his back broken, but then there's Night's Quest and Night's End as well, which has this Azrael Asbats, as he's known, in the suit instead of Bruce Wayne, and a lot of the, like for example, he causes trouble. He causes trouble in the Bat family because they don't like working for him. Jim Gordon can tell it's not the same guy. Some of the villains are like, who's this dude turning up? So they're kind of interesting, those stories, because it's like, well, what would happen if somebody else was Batman for a while? So that runs for a while. Then Bruce Wayne recovers somehow. He recovers and retrains, and obviously he comes back for a little period of time. For the I can't remember, but for some reason Bruce Wayne can't come back straight away. He has to like get back up to 100% fitness. So Dick Grayson becomes Batman for a while as well in Batman Prodigal. And these events are referenced like 10 years later. There are little exchanges where there's a bit of no man's land 10 years later where Jim Gordon's like, what, you think I didn't know that you had two imposters in the suit? Joker mentions it as well. So that's Nightfall. What else happens? So yeah, and all the way through. So Bane is a major new villain who comes, and then it's not too. So we have a little. So obviously that the Nightfall is a very, very big story arc. It went across all of the different comics. So there was Batman, Detective Comics, Shadow of the Bat, Legends of the Dark Knight, and then there was Robin, there was Nightwing. Eventually there was a Catwoman comic as well. And this Nightfall story ran all the way through all of them. So if you're a comic book reader at the time, you'd had to have bought every single book to follow the story. Then there's this period where Doug Mensch and Kelly Jones just do these kind of, villain of the week type stories for about a year. Chuck Dixon is on Detective Comics during that time, who I spoke to last week. He has a lot of cool stories during that time, including that Riddler one that we talked about and various others. So, when there are these big super events, it ties everything in. But there's also just kind of like, well, Batman's just out this month, and it's just like, whatever the story, Mad Hatter's back or whatever it is, Mr. Freeze has been released, and just like you watch on TV, there were just these self-contained 1 or 2 issue stories that happen as well. What else? There's a number of other things to mention about the Batman continuity during this period. Okay, so the first thing is that Tim Drake, who I mentioned, got a girlfriend called Stephanie Brown. Let me bring up Stephanie Brown. And let's have a look at Stephanie Brown. See if a good image of her. Hold on. Okay, so there's a character called the Spoiler. Okay, who is a girl called Stephanie Brown. She looks like this. She's a blonde, and she goes out with Tim Drake. She goes to the same school as Tim Drake. She's a teenager, and when she's Spoiler, she looks like this, or she looks like that. Okay, so she becomes a kind of vigilante because her father is this man here. the Clue Master, Arthur Brown. Now, the Clue Master is an actual like supervillain. He's in like the 70s comics as well. He's like a kind of D-lister, even like like a really shitty villain. There's a brilliant Chuck Dixon Riddler story that we were talking about last week, where Riddler basically kidnaps Arthur Brown, Clue Master, and tortures him for ripping off his gimmick. He's like, I am the Riddler. What the fuck is the Clue Master? You know? So he basically he's bullied a bit by the other villains too. But Stephanie Brown is ashamed of the fact that her dad is this villain, and Croc, who spent most of her childhood in jail, and she doesn't want to be like her dad, so she turns to crime fighting. This is her origin story, okay? And if you can imagine, when Batman is off on his adventures and so on, Spoiler turns up. She just turns up. She's out there fighting crime as well. So she's around, okay? Worth bearing in mind. Another character who's around is the Huntress. So this is Huntress, who looks like that. No, that's not the right Huntress. What's her? I'm gonna use the database again. This Huntress here. Hold on. She's hanging around too. It's God's sake. Where's the proper Huntress? Sorry, I hate new things. We need the right Huntress. We need the Huntress of New Earth. What the fuck's her name? She's got an Italian name. She's she's got a similar story to. There she is, Helena Bertinelli. There she is, Huntress. Now she is from a criminal, organized crime background, and she becomes a crime fighter too. But she doesn't want to abide by Batman's code. She wants to kill and things. So Batman resents her being around because she won't play by his rules. There she is. Look, that's what she got across. Huntress. She's Italian, of course, Catholic. So yeah, on any given night, Batman could bump into either Spoiler or Huntress. And more about her in a moment. You can see she's got good rack on her, as a lot of the characters have. Decent arse shot of her. Yeah. There you can see her from behind. So there is Huntress. Okay. Now, what? Oh yes, there are some other characters worth mentioning. First of all, there is Renee Montoya. She's in some fucking TV show. She hangs around as well with Harvey Bullock. Harvey Bullock. These are two cops. Now, Harvey Bullock, he's in the comics going right back to the 70s. He's this like fat slob, kind of always unshaven, chomping on a cigar, but he's like a good egg. But he's up for using like rougher methods. Renee Montoya, she's like this Hispanic female cop, and they work together as a partnership. Often, if we spend some time with the police, we'll be spending time with Montoya and Bullock. Okay, so there we go. I mean, Montoya got a rack on her as well occasionally. So there we go. So that is Montoya and Bullock. They're major parts of the canon as well. And the reason I'm mentioning all of these ancillary characters is that when you're reading along, you'll be like, if you don't know who these people are, you'll be looking them up all the time. Like, who is this fat cop that they keep on? Oh, it's Harvey Bullock. who's this Spanish chick? Oh, well, that's Rennie Montoya, and they are part of the general crew. So they're like Jim Gordon's trusted team. Like Gordon, they don't know who Batman is, but they trust Batman. The rest of the cops, bit less so. Okay. So often we see Montoya and Bullock. Any other major characters? Oh yeah, there's this dweeb. I don't know who this. This is a really weird character, but Harold. This Harold character. Now he is like this kind of Quasimodo guy that hangs around the Batcave and stuff. He's like some like little retard. He doesn't really crop up that much, but he's like around. He's like sometimes he's there and sometimes he isn't. So yeah, he's another guy. You'd be like, who the fuck is this guy who's hanging around the Batcave? But he's like kind of Batman's personal kind of gimp, basically, who just helps him out on machines and things. Okay, so that's, yeah, there he is in the Batcave, Harold. Okay, if you want to speak about TNA, by the way, Catwoman. Tell you what, as she's there's the same artist, Jim Ballant, I think his name is on Catwoman for most of the 90s, and she has always got an enormous pair on her, and like a very the Catwoman comics are borderline pornographic, I would suggest. I'm not trying to make some feminist point. I mean, it's just like it's impossible to read them without noticing how massive her boobs are, and occasionally we get a full-on arse shot of her as well. So that's something to bear. If you're one of those people who worries about exploitation of women or whatever, maybe the Catwoman comics of this period are not for you. So there we go. Anyway, what else? Who are the other major characters in this sort of time frame? Before we get into because we're about to embark on a sequence of major storylines that that are kind of relentless, basically from this point in the mid 90s onwards. It never really ends. And I'm just trying to think of any other major people that you need to know about before we move forward. We talked about, we've even mentioned Harold. No, not really. No. So let us now. So the next thing that happens is that there's a major event called Contagion, in which there's a deadly plague, a deadly pandemic comes to Gotham, and it's called the Clench, and it kind of puts boils on people's faces and makes them, it's basically like the plague, makes people die. And we're told during the story that things were going to shit in Gotham anyway. Like the population has more than halved, just in the course of the past decade. So Gotham is depicted like almost like Detroit is like falling apart already, and now this plague it's got the highest crime rate in America. Now this plague has hit it as well, and it's kind of strange because we see that Batman is up against like an invisible enemy. Very interesting story to read now that we've lived through the COVID pandemic, right? Because all of these things that we've got used to seeing, like the CDC and kind of crime, kind of virus stats on TV and stuff, they imagined in the mid 90s that's what it would be like. So that was kind of interesting. The other major thing that happens in Contagion, what happens there? Well, basically, they're trying to figure out, like, well, who was behind this? You know, was there anybody behind it? And they never really get to the bottom of if if the virus was man-made or did it come from a bat? You know, um, and in the follow-up story, Legacy, it basically transpired that Ra's al Ghul was behind all of this, and Legacy kind of takes. He wants to take the pandemic. He wants to take the virus global, and Batman and his team have to set out to stop him. So that happens. Bane makes a big comeback during the Legacy storyline. Teams up with Ra's al Ghul. That's a super cool story. Chuck Dixon one. But it doesn't really do much to change any of the status quo. It's just something that happens. But then an event does come along that does change the state. One thing I'll say about the Contagion storyline is that there's a very interesting angle where the elite of Gotham lock themselves away because they don't want to get the pandemic, and they lock out all of the plebs. The way the elite are depicted in Contagion as this kind of decrepit, debauched, because they basically lock themselves in this mansion and become like increasingly debauched. They even like throw out all of the servants, and they start like having orgies. It's really weird. And they're seen as being like these grotesque, horrible, evil people. So yeah, that happens. I seem to remember there's a weird subplot where Poison Ivy has to go in and try to rescue, and Batman makes a deal because she's immune to the virus or whatever. But obviously she's Poison Ivy, so she betrays him pretty quickly. Yeah, so that was Contagion, and then Ra's, of course, he wants to clear out. He's like, what do you want to save this planet for? It's all let's start again, clear them out, make a new start. But of course, they thwart Ra's al Ghul's plans. They break up that partnership with Bane. There's some couple of really dodgy. Oh yeah, this is a bit of lore that we should establish as well, which is that, because it becomes significant later for various reasons, which is that Ra's al Ghul has a daughter, of course, Talia al Ghul, and Talia al Ghul is deeply in love with Batman / Bruce Wayne. Also, Ra's al Ghul figures out that Bruce Wayne is Batman, but Ra's al Ghul knows that Batman is Bruce Wayne. But Ra's is like above everyone else. He's like apart from all of the other villains. He's got his League of Assassins, and he's 700 years old. So he kind of operates in a realm above and beyond everybody else. His plots are usually global plots rather than Gotham plots. He doesn't care about the organized crime or making money. He has unlimited resources, but basically can't die. And his minions tend to be very obedient to him. I serve the demon. They say, I serve the demon. So Ra's, when he turns up, it's usually quite a big deal. Like he's often gone for years on end, and then when he comes back, it's an event. I mean, to be fair, that is true of most of the villains. Like Joker's gone for a long time and then he's back, or Bane is gone for a long time and then he's back. Whereas other villains are always around. Like Catwoman is always around because she's got her own comic. Penguin is like a kind of he is also like a permanent part of the furniture. As we'll get on to, whenever there is money to be made, Penguin. So, for example, in the Contagion storyline, there's obviously people start working on a vaccine, right? And when they start finding cures and things, Penguin's like, well, I want that because it'll make me a lot of money. So Penguin is always sneaking around the edges, making money on the margins. He's like a permanent. It's not even so the underground is like gangsters, organized crime. Penguin is always there as the almost like the kind of economy for the underground. He's always like, for example, if Catwoman ever steals anything, Penguin can give her fencing services. Like he'll be able to sort out the sale for her. He Penguin is always providing logistics for the other villains. He's always a go-between. That tends to, and he operates from this iceberg lounge. So Penguin and Catwoman are kind of always around, whereas a lot of the other villains are either if they're major league like Raish or Joker or Bane, they're gone for a long time, and when they're back, it's a big deal. Other villains, so for example, Mr. Freeze, Ventriloquist and Scarface, Mad Hatter, Two-Face, they're basically either they're in Arkham or they're out. If they're out, it's a story. But most of the time they're in Arkham, so we don't have to worry about them. And a lot of the time you'll see, who's behind this? Well, Riddler's in prison, so it can't be him. Well, Mad Hatter, he's still in Arkham, so it can't be him. Scarecrow's another typical Arkham inmate. I'm trying to think, like, there's a kind of Arkham crew who are like the usual suspects, Ventriloquist, Scarecrow, Mad Hatter, Riddler, Joker's typically in Arkham. Black Mask. Black Mask goes to Blackgate Penitentiary, not to Arkham. Mr. Zazz is in Arkham. There's a character called KG Beast, who's like this big, massive guy, who's a Russian. He was a big villain in the late 80s during the late Cold War, but he becomes like downgraded to be like a kind of thug for hire type thing. He goes to Blackgate. Who else goes to Blackgate? Lock. There's a character called Lockup who's like a psycho guard. He's a kind of there's a character called Blockbuster, who is Nightwing's main villain. And if you know anything about the comics, there's a big character from the 70s who's this giant guy called Blockbuster. But he's got a brother who also is known as Blockbuster, who's like a mastermind criminal. And it's that second and he has his brother killed or something. And that second Blockbuster is the Nightwing villain. Who else? And then there's like, there is so many minor villains as well beneath those major ones. Calendar Man plays a major role in The Long Halloween. He's in Arkham sometimes. You'll see Crazy Quilt. Crazy Quilt is actually really interesting. He's a bit like if Mr. D was a villain, because he's an artist. But what happens is that he's an artist who loses his sight, or he loses the ability to see color. And basically in all of the Crazy Quilt stories, he's apprehended by Robin, and like in his history, Robin blinds him, and so Crazy Quilt has a vendetta against Robin. And in fact, when Jason Todd first becomes Robin, Crazy Quilt doesn't actually know that it's a different guy and tries to kill him. Actually beats the shit out of him. I also believe Crazy Quilt has a go at Tim Drake at one point as well. So Crazy Quilt. Do you want to see Crazy Quilt? He's a Crazy Quilt. He's a nutty villain. There he is. Very colourful character. There's some fucking Lego Crazy Quilt. There's Crazy Quilt. Look, there he is. A kind of more colourful one, but he absolutely hates Robin. That's his thing. He wants to He wants to destroy Robin. Any other villains I've forgotten? Jog my memory, friends. Jog my memory, friends. Yeah. Okay. Shall we carry on? So anyway, there's this. So after the plague, after it's found out there's Al-Ghul who is behind it all, and they thwart his plan. Oh yes, Ratcatcher. Okay, let's have a little deep dive on the Rogues Gallery, because all of these guys are around and they're in and out of prison. And so Crazy Quilt is a Arkham Asylum guy, but Ratcatcher is a horrible villain, really. Horrible little sod he is. Ratcatcher lives down the sewers and he has this army of rats. Horrible little fucker. He is another Blackgate guy. He doesn't go to Arkham, he goes to Blackgate. Again, like, he's a kind of C-list kind of D-list type villain. There he is. You can see him sometimes. He's got the horrible little teeth like that. But he can cause a lot of trouble when he's causes Batman some trouble sometimes. So Ratcatcher, he comes back quite a bit and is utilized. There's as I mentioned on Chuck Dixon last week, you always know the tiers of the villains, because there's one story where Mr. Freeze turns up and he's like, well, who the fuck are you, Ratcatcher? So it's obvious, like, if Mr. Freeze is a B tier villain or a second tier villain, he puts Ratcatcher in his place straight away. But I would say that Ratcatcher is probably a tier above the likes of Crazy Quilt or Clue Master Arthur Brown. Okay. Now the major villain, Killer Croc. Now, Killer Croc is the one character that they don't do that well in the Batman the Animated Series, because in the comics, Killer Croc is not like literally a crocodile. He actually has some brains about him. He's a physical threat. He could go toe to toe with Batman. He's a sort of character who could probably have a fight with Bane, for example. Probably have a fight with KGB. I mean, KG Beast is a fucking unit as well. Let me show you KG Beast. So yeah, KG Beast can fight as well. So these are the sorts of villains who, for example, right, if Robin was on a solo mission and Killer Croc was there, Robin would probably have to run away, because Killer Croc would have, like, Killer Croc is lethal. And he's not just a henchman tier. He is he can run his own gang. He is sentient. He's not like Thicko, okay? So don't think that Killer Croc is thick. Who else is there, folks? Jog my memory. Killer Croc. Yeah, I mean, Two-Face. Everybody knows Two-Face's origin story. We'll get back to Two-Face in a minute, because there's some really cool Two-Face stories in some of these crossover arcs. But obviously, Two-Face was Harvey Dent, the lawyer, who was mates with Bruce Wayne, but he has this like split personality basically, and there are a lot of cool Two-Face stories. He's also obsessed with the number 2 and with flicking his coin, of course. Any other villains? Well, we're at it. Oh yes, Clayface. Clayface, actually, there are 4 Clayfaces. Where are we? Let's have a look. Clayface 3, for example, is this one. He's a really fucking tragic figure. So Clayface 1. Let me see if I can get all 4 Clayfaces. 4 Clayfaces. Do we have all 4 of them? every version of Clayface. Here we go. Just trying to find a picture of them. The internet is fucking useless, isn't it? It really is. Every version of Clayface explained. Here we go. So this will help us out. Basil Karlo was an actor, okay, and originally he was an actor who was bitter about losing some star role that he had, and he was kind of a bit washed up, and so he appeared wearing different faces. If you remember False Face in the Batman 66 series, he was a bit like that. He'd wear different people's faces as he committed various crimes. Okay. That was Basil Karlo. Then there was Matt Hagen, who was literally, who had like more like shape-shifting powers. He looked like that. He dies. He gets killed. I can't remember exactly how he gets killed, but he does. And then there's this really tragic Clayface 3, Pest and Pain, who looks like that, and he can't touch it. Every person he touches turns to mud, basically. It's really, really sad. And then there's also a girl one, Clayface 4, Sondra Fuller. And somehow this Clayface and that Clayface fall in love, and they have a little clay kid as well. And there's a very good story called The Mud Pack, which you should track down. It was written in 1989, which tells the story of how the original Basil Karlo Clayface tracks down the corpse of Matt Hagen, extracts the DNA, gets DNA from him, gets DNA from her, and injects them into himself to become the ultimate Clayface. And that looks like this. Okay, so that's Clayface. He is a physical threat as well, who could. He almost kills Batman in at the start of Cataclysm, which we're about to talk about. Any other villains while we're at it? Roland Daggett killed Matt Hagen. Yes. Who else? Yeah. So there's Killer Moth, who is pivotal in Killer Moth for some reason. Remember, like I was saying that Crazy Quilt hates Robin. Killer Moth has got a thing for Batgirl, I believe, and is often involved in whenever there's a Batgirl, there are run-ins with Killer Moth. Hold on. Here's Killer Moth. He also, much like Clue Master Arthur Brown and Crazy Quilt, is a D-lister. Like, he's treated as a bit of a joke. He also is fucking look at. That's just pathetic. What the fuck is that? They tried to make him a bit cooler later. But he's treated as a bit of a loser in the comics. I would suggest is Killer Moth. So yeah, he exists. There's Firefly, Firefly seems to be more of a gun for hire a lot of the time. Deathstroke is a gun for hire, although Deathstroke's not kind of in the wider DC universe. Deathstroke makes occasional appearances. More likely to get hired on any given arc is Deadshot. He's an assassin who gets hired in. Any others, friends? I talked about Scarface. Man-Bat. Man-Bat is a really tragic character. He's a tragic character as well, really tragic, because it's almost like the Fly storyline, where he cross-pollinates his DNA with a bat and starts like becoming more bat than man. So the Man-Bat is a very sad story. So there we go. Anyone else? I said I'm not going to go as far as New 52 with Court of the Owls. Solomon Grundy is not really a Batman villain. Clockkin is not a Batman villain. Scarecrow. I mean, I talked about Scarecrow. I talked about the main ones. The Scarecrow, in my experience, very seldom has his own stories. Actually, he tends to crop up in like the mega events as like, ooh, another guy who's on the loose type thing. He plays quite a major role in that Resurrection Night that I mentioned when they all bust out of Arkham. But yeah, Scarecrow. There we go. All right, shall we carry on? So anyway, after the Contagion event, there is an earthquake hits Gotham, known as Cataclysm, which sends the city into total chaos. And this obviously changes everything because it changes everything because obviously you have kind of lawlessness breaking out because loads of people flee. Buildings are getting devastated, etc., etc. So Cataclysm is this deadly earthquake that comes along, and there are all sorts of interesting stories that happen as a result, including this one story where Jeremiah Arkham is stuck, and he's running out of supplies, and the patients are starting to starve, and he's like, do I let them out? Do I let them die? And basically he ends up letting them out as well towards the end. So yeah, so that's Cataclysm. And then you get the Road to No Man's Land, which is basically the aftermath of the earthquake and what goes on during the aftermath. Bruce Wayne goes to Washington to try to get funds to save the city, but the government decide that rather than save Gotham, rather than pump charity funds in, it's such a disaster of a place after having had an earthquake, 2 plagues, the worst crime rate in America, and all the rest of it. Things are so bad in Gotham that they'd rather just cut it off. They'd rather just declare it a no man's land, cut it off from funding, and they give everybody like a certain amount of time to get out of the city before they use the military to close it off. So nobody's allowed in or out of Gotham during the no man's land. And the no man's land is a major event that runs for an entire calendar year of the actual comics. It's a huge book. It's like 4 volumes. Each volume's like 600 pages. It's massive. And in this new status quo, basically you get loads of people leave, obviously, but for one reason or another, you get people who stay. You get people who stay because it's their home. And they don't want to leave. You get people who stay for some other reason. You get people who stay because they're just like they haven't got the means to escape. They're too poor. And you get like welfare bums and like homeless and stuff like that. And of course, criminals stay as well, because effectively you have a lawless area. And very quickly during the no man's land, it's really cool actually, because they have these maps. They have these maps of Gotham. See if I can find one to show you. No Man's Land maps. Show you these maps now that they draw. It's really a very cool event. Hold on a minute. The internet is so shit. It really is. I'm just trying to find a map, for God's sake. Stop trying to take me to Pinterest. Here we go. So here is the map of Gotham during the No Man's Land, and as you can see, all of the different villains carve up the city between themselves. Okay, they carve up each of the districts of the city. So at the start of No Man's Land, you have this situation where the government has cut them off. Obviously, Jim Gordon tries to get a job, and nowhere else will have him because one, he was the commissioner who had to rely on Batman during it. Two, the crime rate was terrible anyway, and three, he was the commissioner when all of this shit happened. So Gordon couldn't get a job anywhere else. They just laughed at him. So he had to stay. His wife is with him. He's got a wife called Sarah. I think her name is Sarah. Is her name Sarah? And a really interesting thing that happens during this story is that Penguin, who I mentioned, has a line to the outside world. He is able to get goods from the outside. He's able to sell goods to the outside. There's a 100% trade embargo on Gotham. Nothing comes in, nothing comes out, and it's you see the U.S. Army are there on the borders, stopping people leaving, stopping people coming in, stopping goods coming in. It's 100% embargo. Okay. So there's a really fun little story in the early parts of No Man's Land where the Penguin auctions an apple, just one apple, and people are bidding like 100 gallons of oil, 10,000 gallons of oil, and he ends up selling it for this diamond, which has become worthless in the No Man's Land. But obviously, he can trade it to the outside world for lots of different things. So the Penguin does extremely well out of this and is living in like kind of palatial. He's almost like kind of living in the lap of luxury, while other people are like dying in the street starving type thing. Okay, so Penguin does very well out of it all. But as you can see, Killer Croc is out. Mad Hatter takes an area. Ventriloquist and Scarface take an area. Two-Face takes a big area here. And Black Mask is a big player because he's another very organized crime boss, major villain. And who else? Oh yeah, and Poison Ivy takes up residence in this Robinson Park. Poison Ivy is actually in that Robinson Park for a very long time, which we'll talk about in a moment. And then basically, as this story progresses, Batman's gone missing. Batman leaves, like he's gone. First of all, Bruce Wayne went to Washington, and then we discover he was off, like making plans elsewhere. Gordon and the police, Montoya stays, Bullock stays, obviously, and there's this other cop called Petit. And in these new conditions, this Petit is like, listen, we don't have to play by the law anymore. We can just kill these fuckers. And given that it's gang warfare, if the police are going to control any turf, we're going to have to just mow these people down. So we're quickly acclimatized to a very harsh world during during No Man's Land. Okay, very harsh world indeed. And Gordon listens to this guy Petit, and there's a lot of really interesting things that happen. So, for example, there are these two gangs down here called the Street Demons and the Low Boys. They have these two regions here, and this guy Petit and Gordon hatch this plan. I can zoom in a bit. That's as far as I can go in. They hatch this plan where they're good. They essentially plant a false flag in, like they do a false flag attack in the Street Demons region, making it look like the Low Boys, and then they do the same the other way around, and they cause a turf war between the Low Boys and the Street Demons. And then while they're fighting, essentially the cops come in and flank them through the middle, and end up taking the entire region. So this Petit is actually like quite a good military, like he's like a military strategist, and Gordon is pretty fucking hardcore during this period. He's like, yeah, he quickly understands that you have to play it's a much more Machiavellian world, okay? And his wife Sarah is not comfortable, and you always see her moaning, and you know that Gordon and his wife constantly arguing all the way through this story because he has to compromise his morals basically in this new harsh world. Okay. Then Batman turns up. He comes back. He turns up back up here somewhere because if you remember, Wayne Manor's up here. Wayne Manor is destroyed, so he has these satellite bat caves all around the place. But Batman comes in up the top and works his way down this way. So who's in Burnley? I think he faces. I think it's Ventriloquist and Scarface first. Have a look, a little turf up here. He clears them out, and he gets rid of Mad Hatter in short order as well. And so Batman takes the top. So you have the situation where the cops take this bit, Batman takes this bit. And so the major players in the middle are the Penguin, Two-Face, and Killer Croc is kind of around here somewhere. It's kind of really interesting. You have this kind of situation furling. To make matters even more interesting, Gordon is fucking furious with Batman during this whole story because he can't forgive him for leaving during the first like few months of No Man's Land, and he thinks he's betrayed him. And there's some really amazing bits of storytelling all the way through this, as you see the condition where each of these characters down test their relationships. Also, when Batman first arrives, he takes out the Ventriloquist and Scarface, and all the people are like, "Hey, hold on a second. You may hate their methods, but they were keeping us safe. They gave us food. Without those two, it would be like survival of the fittest. They actually made sure everybody got their fair share. What are you going to do now?" And he's like, "Well, I've cleared them out. I've given you your freedom." And they're like, "We don't want freedom. We want to be told what to do." And so basically, there's this funny situation where the gangsters have recreated feudal conditions, and the people, I say the peasants, but they're just like the surviving members of Gotham. They're just left behind, and Batman's like, "Yeah, okay, then I'll become you pay me tribute, and I'll keep you safe." So he actually plays this game as well. So after he clears out Scarface and Ventriloquist, he just takes over. He just like continues their operation, which is really interesting to see how Batman quickly understands the Machiavellian conditions that things have reverted to here, and just like immediately plays ball. It's also like he explains it like, he's like, I get it now. These are the left behinds, the fucking welfare bums. He goes on this like massive right wing rant in the middle, like a proper kind of almost like libertarian rant, where it's like, these are the ne'er do wells and the scumbags. Of course, they want to be told what to do, you know. So that is kind of interesting as well. That is in there. He also, as Bruce Wayne, tries to set up like entrepreneurial startership funds. Like you see him trying to seed money, and the people are like, what do I know about business? Like, so the people of Gotham are seen to be really fucking pathetic in this. Like they really don't want to help themselves. They want to be helped. They want a feudal lord. So it's really interesting because you see him trying to push like almost like kind of capitalist solutions to the problem. but feudalism wins out in the no man's land, and he comes to peace with that slowly but surely. But it's really interesting. Also, Superman turns up, and he has like the same realization, and then by the end of the issue, Batman's like, yeah, this is my city, Clark, fuck off, just get out of here. And Superman's like, yeah, you're right, I don't know, I can't work under these conditions. By then, so he leaves as well. Like, he's like, I can't, because again they see him as a savior, and they won't help themselves. They're just kind of like like feudal peasants, and Superman's not prepared to do that, whereas Batman is. So yes, there is a racial element to the gangs. The low boys and the street demons. The low boys, there's a suggestion that they're Hispanic, for example. So there is a kind of, and the triads are Chinese as well. So there is a racial element to it. There's also a faith sector where the church is running, and there's a really wicked story in here where there's this Christian who's brought all these people from different backgrounds into the church, and he's running like a kind of charity organization, and they've managed to get food and provisions and things. But he brings in this, like, he has the Scarecrow there as well, and the Huntress turns up at the church because obviously she's a Christian too, and she's like, "What the fuck are you doing? Like, this is the Scarecrow. What? How can you? Oh yeah, they're all children under the Lamb of God and all of this sort of stuff." And so this like naive priest is literally looking after Scarecrow, and it's a really, really interesting story because Scarecrow, while he's there, basically starts playing like psychological games with all of the people in this faith district, and they have faith and hope, and Scarecrow hates that. He wants them to have fear, so he basically like goes round planting poison seeds at everybody and starts trying to like set people at each other, and he sets up this thing where somebody steals all the food, and basically just like for no reason at all has this sadistic pleasure in watching this parish fall apart because of their Christian naivety. Very interesting story. Very interesting story indeed. So yeah, the the Scarecrow subplot is really interesting in the Faith District. What else happens? No Man's Land goes on for a long time. Like, there's loads of different, like there's a war between Penguin and Two-Face's districts. Penguin obviously tries to avoid conflict, but they set this, like, Batman sets up this trap where like Two-Face and Penguin have to like face off against each other. So that's an interesting story. What else happens? There's a absolute. I think this happens in No Man's Land. It could happen in the later story. There's an absolutely wicked story where Two-Face abducts Renee Montoya, the cop, and he holds a trial. He wants to put Jim Gordon on trial for failing to live up to his own morals, and he calls Renee Montoya as a witness. And on top of it, it seems like Harvey Dent has the hots for Renee Montoya. That is a wicked little story arc. I think it happens in No Man's Land where they're having this trial, and you get to see like Two-Face the lawyer, or Harvey Dent the lawyer, and Montoya is able to. She ends up calling as they end up calling as a witness. No, Jim Gordon defends himself and asks him to call Harvey Dent as a witness, and so, or Two-Face as a witness or something. So you get this like really interesting scene where Two-Face is cross-examining himself. Now, it sounds really corny and weak, but it's actually amazing. You get these pages where he's having this back and forth with himself, and he ends up like saying, "Oh, there's not enough evidence to put Jim Gordon away," and it fucking just like he can't take it, basically. But it's because he had to question himself. That is a really awesome story that happens in No Man's Land. And you get this thing where Two-Face has a weird thing from Montoya. I mean, I say she's kidnapped for about 6 months or something. Like he keeps her in a dungeon and all sorts. So it's not like Montoya gets away easily. What else? There's a story where Poison Ivy has taken over the park, and she has all of these like children that she takes, like orphan children, and she kind of makes them like semi-plant. It's really fucking dark. And then Clayface turns up, imprisons Poison Ivy, and makes these children work as slave labor, providing fruit, apples and pears and things for the Penguin, who can then sell it at mass profit. So Clayface is using slave, and so that is a major storyline as well. I think Poison Ivy may even kill Clayface in that story. You'd have to double check those details, but it's really, really interesting. You're saying who would employ Two-Face as a lawyer? You have to understand that. You have to understand that there's no law. This is the No Man's Land, so he controls the old courtroom district. But there's no like he's just declared himself. It's just like a kangaroo court where he's got the courtroom. Yes. Anyway, cut a long story short, because there's so many things that happen. The Joker has been really quiet during No Man's Land. He's bored. He hates the fact there's no law and order, because while everything's in chaos, how can he stand out? He's upset that nobody's paying attention to him. Weirdly, Harley Quinn has turned up as well, which I actually find a bit jarring, because she's just like she is from the cartoon, you know, hey Mr. J. But also, unlike in the cartoon, obviously Joker is quite abusive towards Harley Quinn, but you can kind of get away with it because it's slapstick. In the comics, it's fucking brutal. It's just straight up domestic abuse. I mean, there are some panels where he just chokes. She's talking too much, and he just chokes her and just says, "Shut up, bitch." You know. So Joker really does abuse Harley Quinn a lot in the comics. The other thing is that he is he's basically just upset that nobody's paying attention to him. So he hatches this plan where he basically wants people to. He wants Batman in particular to pay attention to him, and all through the No Man's Land, he's just like kind of sticks a few Joker signs up, and every once in a while, Batman sends like Azrael or Robin or someone to go and see what the Joker's up to. And when they confront the Joker, he's like, "What the fuck is this? You send in the B team? You send in the second stringers? You send in this fucking imposter after me? I'm the Joker, damn it! Where is Batman himself?" So he's like really like his ego is hurt by the fact that Batman has ignored him for the entirety of the No Man's Land. So what he does is that he abducts all of the babies in Gotham, like loads and loads of little like newborn babies. It's actually fucking devastating, because I mean, if you want, like, this is going to be very spoiler rich, folks. If you don't want spoilers, so close your ears. But basically, Gordon's he manages to take over somehow the Gotham Police Department, and he's got all of the babies, all of these newborn babies there. And then in order to make sure that people pay attention to him, he starts threatening that he's gonna, like, he's got a baby, like a brand new newborn baby just in a nappy, and he's threatened to like drop it, you know. So basically, Gordon's wife goes in there, Sarah, and there's this scene where basically like Joker gives himself up. He's like, all right, everybody's around. Jim Gordon's there, Batman's there, everybody's around. And just without warning at the last minute, oh yeah, in the middle of all of this, that Petit fellow goes completely apeshit. He goes mad and starts like, Joker has dressed up a lot of cops as Jokers, if you can imagine, and Petit is like killing his own men. So he's gone off the deep end. This Petit. But anyway, you have this scene, and Joker basically ends up killing Gordon's wife, and it is a absolutely devastating scene. It's a devastating scene. You can see Gordon is like shaken, and in that moment he has a gun and wants to kill Joker, and Batman's there, and obviously they're not meant to kill and so on, and he has like a bit of a breakdown. It's fucking brutal. It really is brutal, that scene. So yeah, and to make matters worse, obviously he's also already shot the daughter, so he's like fucking just destroyed Gordon's life, killed his wife, etc. So this sets things up now for the next storyline, where Gordon is just like really sad and lonely because he lost the will to live, basically. Anyway, oh yeah, he does. Yeah, you're right. He does shoot Joker's knee, but weirdly, I don't know if Joker shouldn't be able to walk again, right? But I think they forget about that, or somebody forgot about that, because that injury doesn't seem lasting. Whereas the fact that Gordon's wife is dead is lasting, and it has a major impact on the status quo as well. Oh, it's terrible. It's really hits you badly when you read it as well. So then coming out of No Man's Land, there's the question of, well, they want to, the public opinion on whether the No Man's Land was a good idea starts to change in the rest of the USA. The media start talking in a different way, and all of a sudden there are loads of people, the people who were campaigning against Gotham being bailed out and now saying Gotham should be part of the USA again. And there's a neat bit of elite theory in here, because there's a villain who I didn't mention actually, called Nicholas Scratch, who's this guy who's got like he was a nerd who becomes a rock star, and he almost like teaches himself game, if that makes any sense. And he's got super charisma and rhetoric, and he makes this massive campaign. So it's kind of top down in a way, because the public sentiment against Gotham being bailed out and being made into a no man's land was elite driven in the first place, by this guy Nicholas Scratch, who goes on TV and sells out stadiums and all sorts of things. And then you then find out, well, why is public opinion swaying now? Like, who is behind this? Why all of a sudden now have the people of the rest of the USA, what, they've just suddenly become good, like good people? No, you find out that there's another person who eyes up, let's just say, a massive business opportunity in the rebuilding of Gotham. And who in the DC universe do you think that is? Well, you go through the possibilities. Well, Al-Ghul, he doesn't really need money. It's not his style. Who wants more money and power always? So again, massive spoilers, folks. Turns out there is Lex Luthor. Lex Luthor starts this campaign where not only is he gonna uh, um, lobby to get Gotham reinstated as part of the USA, he is going to fund the rebuilding project. Okay, and of course, what he's thinking is, I'm going to control this city. So you get this massive showdown between Batman and Lex Luthor because he's like, well, this is my city. This is my city. And of course, Bruce Wayne, as a billionaire, of course, he wants to fund the rebuilding project. And I'm trying to remember how they all. I actually thought this part of the story is kind of shoddily dealt with, but Lex Luthor hires Bane. He's got this like female minion called Mercy who has a massive scrap with Catwoman at some point. There's this whole side plot where Catwoman has to steal some discs and all this sort of thing, which are involved with it as well. It turns out that Luthor was the Penguin's outside contact, and this is trailed in the comics because you just noticed that Penguin's computer has got Luthor Industries on it. So Penguin, in a way, was not really like Luthor's man, but he had like a connection with Luthor. And Penguin goes to Luthor and says, like, listen, in the new Gotham, you can control all the industries, but I want control of the underworld. And for whatever reason, Luthor's not up for that, and Penguin gets pissed off. So there's a weird bit of like, there's like a 2 or 3 way dance where Catwoman and Penguin team up against Luthor, weirdly. So that happens. But basically, they find out. I'm trying to remember how it wraps up, but they find out that obviously Luthor does not have benign intentions, and they basically just threaten to expose him to the media, and he just slinks off basically. So he ends up expending like billions of dollars, and then he doesn't get any of the fruits of it. So there we go. What else? Yeah, I mean, she literally does hide some discs in her undies. Yeah, that is true. All right, so that is No Man's Land, and then we're coming out of that. The rebuilding project is called Evolution. I think that was that story I was talking about. And then you have a whole the Officer Down storyline, and the new, like, they basically reestablish the new status quo, and quite a few little things happen here. There's also the okay, yeah, let me just back up a minute. So yeah, one of the things I forgot to mention during the No Man's Land is that do you remember I mentioned the Huntress? She becomes Batgirl during this, and basically can't work with Batman. Huntress won't take orders, and they argue relentlessly. And in one particular story, Batman gives her an absolute bollocking and says, listen, you failed once, you failed twice, you failed 3 times, you're fucking fired. Get out of here. You cannot wear the bat suit anymore. Just get out. I don't want to see you. If I see you as the Huntress, I'm going to kick your ass as well. And every once in a while, you'll see Batman freak out at one of his minions, and he basically just fucking fires her. And so there's a new Batgirl who comes in called Cassandra Cain, who's actually Oriental looking, and she can't talk. She's a mute. anyway, we find out that she has a dad called David Kane, who um, helped to train Batman. I think he worked with Ra's al Ghul, one of the assassins, etc. But he is like one of the world's best assassins, David Kane. Totally deadly guy. Top martial artist. And he can kill you in any one of 1,000 different ways. Knows all the different nerve holes and pinches and pressure points and all of that sort of stuff. And so he trained his daughter from a very early age only in the language of violence. So Cassandra Cain can't talk because her father never taught her how to talk. Only taught her how to fight. So this new Batgirl is like a killing machine. Basically, she's just been like kind of custom made to be an assassin. Obviously, only she's a goodie, so she doesn't kill. But she is deadly. So she's the new Batgirl. That's the other status quo change that happens. Yes. And anyway, then we get another story called Bruce Wayne Murderer, and then it turns into Bruce Wayne Fugitive, whereby yes. So basically, there's Bruce Wayne was seeing some journalist or something. Bruce Wayne always has a bit on the side, and this journalist was snooping around Wayne Manor one night because she thought she'd figured out that Bruce Wayne was Batman. And hold up, there's another major character. She's not that major, but there's a status quo change that happened during the new Gotham. Okay. Gordon retires during the Officer Down story. He just retires, and there's a new commissioner who comes in, some black guy. I forget his name now. Um, and the other thing that happened is that Bruce Wayne is All right, I'm back. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Tell me you can hear me. All right, I am. I have basically made inquiries about getting new internet, and lo and behold, I met with a guy last week about getting 1,000 MB up and 1,000 MB down here in the lodge. It won't even cost me much extra from the 4G that I've got at the moment. Can you imagine that? 1 GB up, 1 GB down. Because this 4G connection has become ropey. It's become unreliable. Anyway, yeah. So there's a black guy commissioner who comes in, and Gordon retires effectively, and then hold on a minute. Let me just kickstart my memory. What the hell happens then? Oh yes, Lucius Fox, who is the CEO of Wayne Enterprises, basically hires a bodyguard for Bruce Wayne for some reason, and this bodyguard is yet another woman. Let me see if I can remember her name now. There's so many of these fucking women running around. Yeah, her name was Sasha Bordeaux. Sasha Bordeaux, Bruce Wayne's bodyguard, a blonde bint who becomes also. Let me just show you a picture of Sasha Bordeaux. I actually find this character really tiresome, but yeah, she looks like she basically, because Bruce Wayne keeps on disappearing. Like, obviously, having a bodyguard is a fucking massive problem for Bruce Wayne because she follows him everywhere. So she finds out that Bruce Wayne is Batman. Yeah, one of many different women from like Silver St. Cloud found out. Vicky Vale found out. Catwoman found out. And here she is. This is the this is the this is Sasha Bordeaux. I forget the name of her, if she has a superhero name or not, but she also becomes like she has a cape version as well. Um, yeah, I forget her name now. It's not important, basically, what her name is, but she basically starts fighting with him as well. During this little period. Now, this is very short-lived. It's very short-lived indeed. This stint where she's fighting alongside Batman, but during this Bruce Wayne murderer storyline, she is with Bruce Wayne / Batman during this, and they're in Wayne Manor and they're coming back from somewhere, and this other bint whose name is something else. She's this other girl, this journalist he was seeing who wears glasses. Um, she was creeping around Wayne Manor because she thought and lo and behold, she is being shot. Okay, and Bruce basically busts himself out of jail and of uh, he really fucking doing a storyline where he's like, there is no Bruce Wayne. There is no Bruce Wayne. Bruce Wayne is the mask, the shit out of Nightwing in one story, blood and everything. And yes, it's an interesting arc. Doesn't Not a lot of consequence really happens other than the fact it's interesting to see what it's like in jail. But that bodyguard that he had, that Sasha Bordeaux, she ends up in jail too, and she has a terrible time. Like, she's beaten up by this fucking butch lesbian every night, and she has an awful time in jail. And it's actually really grim to read as well. And obviously, like, Bruce doesn't bust her out of jail, so she's stuck there for months where he's carrying on being Batman. He's driving away all the Bat families, like real. It's like real kind of how can I say, the arsehole, um, the arsehole Bruce Wayne. What else happens here? So anyway, after that storyline finishes, um, there's a there's a story where Tim Drake Robin quits for some reason. I'm trying to remember why. Hush happens. Hush is a really good story that everybody should read. It's another Jeff Loeb, Jim Lee one. All the villains in play. There's a new villain in town called Hush. Riddler is big in that story, let's just say. But then we have the war games, that come in, and can people hear me? Can you fuckers hear me? Stop complaining about the audio. Can you hear me or what? Just say one if you can hear me. Good. Right. I'll probably wrap up here. Actually, I'm not going to go any further than the war games. I'll stop and I'll take questions, and we'll see what else we'll do next week. So we get up to the war games, which is Tim Drake Robin quits, and I can't remember why he quits now because it's been a while since I read this whole thing, maybe a decade or more. Tim Drake quits, and do you remember I said he's got a girlfriend called Stephanie Brown who goes by the Spoiler? Do you remember I said that? Well, yeah. So he goes by the Stephanie Brown goes by the Spoiler, and she was going out with Tim Drake. After Tim Drake quits as Robin, so if you're counting, remember there was Dick Grayson Robin, there was Jason Todd Robin, and now there's then there was Tim Drake. So he's the third Robin, and he quits. So then Stephanie Brown becomes the new Robin. For Robin and a girl Robin. Okay. And we see I've actually brought the modem right next to me now. Tell me if you can hear me. Fucking fed up with this. Can you hear me? Tell me, just press 1 if you can hear me. I don't know what's wrong with this. Right, I'm literally sitting with the modem right in my hand here. Okay, now where did I leave off? Where did I leave off? Tell me where I left off. Right, so Stephanie Brown becomes the new Robin, and Batman is a disciplinarian. Okay, and we see her trying to train him, but he basically tells her, like, listen, you have to listen to me. If you disobey any of my orders, you're out. And basically she disobeys his orders to save his life. And he's like, right, you're out. You're fucking fired then. Get out. And she's like, what? That's not fair. I mean, she's like, it doesn't matter. I gave you a shot. You weren't good enough. Out. And by the way, if I see you as the spoiler, I'm not going to be happy. So she is like, Stephanie Brown is absolutely devastated. She's failed at Robin. Batman has fired her. No second chances. So she goes out as the spoiler. I don't know, like trying to prove that she still got it or something. But during this period, there's been a Batman and Robin what's happening. They inadvertently trigger a gang war. So the War Games arc is and in the middle of all of this, Stephanie Brown's running around as spoiler, emotionally distraught and so on, and gets apprehended by Black Mask. Black Mask gets her, starts like cutting her mouth, tortures her. She's like really given a very hard time by Black Mask. And there's this doctor who's I actually hate this character. Her name is Leslie Tompkins. She's like a pacifist doctor who has a no violence policy. And anyway, Stephanie Brown is brought to Leslie Tompkins to see if bleeding and injured by Black Mask having tortured her, and basically she dies. Stephanie Brown dies in Leslie Tompkins's care, and then it turns out later on that Leslie Tompkins deliberately let Stephanie Brown die because she was trying to teach a lesson about non-violence. I was like, what fucking nonsense is this? So Stephanie Brown killed by Black Mask during the War Games story arc, and I think that is a good time. Oh, and then Tim Drake, because he feels bad, and Stephanie Brown was his girlfriend and so on. He comes back as Robin. Basically, he's like, right, okay, I'll come back now because this is a disaster. And obviously, Batman, who was so harsh to Stephanie Brown when she was Robin, it's the 18th anniversary of Jason Todd's. Jason Todd would have been 18. So now, Batman personally has the death of 2 Robins on his conscience. Both Stephanie Brown and Jason Todd have both died under his care. So he is fucking furious during this storyline. And he already was, how can I say, he'd gone into like Dick Bruce mode or Dick Batman mode in the Murderer Fugitive storyline. So by the time we get to War Games, like considering everything we've been through, he is just like, I mean, when I say he is grim by this point, really, really grim and sad man by this point. So I think we will finish up here. Sorry about some of my audio issues. Let me just check super chats, and also people do, you can send super chats if you want, but if you don't want to, you can just ask me questions while I'm here, and we're still doing Batman month. You can just ask me questions in the live chat, and I'll see what I can do to answer. Yes, the Eunuch says 7 centuries. Ra's al Ghul definitely on that Sigma grind set. Yeah, well, I mean, it's suggested that Ra's al Ghul has got like several lifetimes of learning behind him. He has a huge amount of knowledge. Glow in the Dark says people don't want to help themselves. Most cities are like that. No wonder Democrats treat them like feudal lands, although they created the conditions that is causing that. Indeed. Then I will have a look at the super chats, if there's been any. And then I'll have a look at some questions in the actual chat before we get out of here. Fellow Ethelward says, sadly, like all Christ cuck material, the Batman comics films promote this turn the other cheek method in dealing with crime and societal decadence. So there we go. How many episodes does Cassandra Cain show up in? Episode? What do you mean episodes? Comic? Like Cassandra Cain is Batgirl for ages. She's Batgirl for absolutely ages. Although at some point she starts talking, and I don't really understand how or why that happens. It's not really explained as far as I can remember. But she doesn't stay mute for all of it. But she is mute for a very long time. She's mute for a very long time. Does the 80s retcon era go into detail about Bruce's schizo break beyond the murder of his parents? No, not really. I would say the actual biggest thing that we get in the comics is these different things testing him and his motives. What are his motives? And I think one of the things that the writers wanted to show is that it's actually not about the death of his parents anymore. It's about something else. What is keeping him going through all of this sort of thing? It can't just be the death of his parents. And then if there's any storyline that really goes into what is the mask and what is the true man, that whole question, it's the Bruce Wayne murderer, Bruce Wayne fugitive, because he's like, oh, Bruce Wayne died basically the night his parents were killed. The real man is Batman, and Bruce Wayne is just a character that he plays. But that is not, even though that's the law, it's not 100% the truth, because there is still a human being in there. And Dick Grayson, the Nightwing, is the one guy who won't allow Batman to be 100% Batman. He always says there's still Bruce in there, I'm not taking that from you. And usually that's enough to bring him back, to bring the real man back, if that makes any sense. But in the Bruce Wayne murderer storyline, where Nightwing does that whole spiel, he beats the shit out of it, like Batman beats the shit out of Nightwing. Properly decks him. So there is a how can I say, it's true that Bruce Wayne is the mask, right? But there's still a dichotomy between Batman being 100% the fucking grim Dark Knight, or Batman being a man who's actually kind of got feelings for people, who can actually talk, who can actually open, because he's very closed off and he pushes people away all of the time. And it's often Nightwing, it's often Dick Grayson who brings the actual man out of the Batman part, because I think there is this dichotomy between being like, the Avenger, the bat creature, and an actual human being. So in a sense, he's right that Bruce Wayne is the mask and the real man is Batman. But what does the Batman mean? is it just this grim creature of the night, or is it somebody who's got friends, somebody who needs other people, somebody who can talk? Because one of the problems a lot of people have with him is that he doesn't explain anything. He shuts people down. He cuts them off. He's gone. And uh, that is something that all of the other characters are scared of him, but Dick Grayson isn't. He's like, it's me you're talking to now. You can't get away with this. They're very affecting scenes as well, because of course Dick Grayson sees him like a father, and Bruce sees him as a son as well. So yeah. Whatever things have we got in here? Sam Petra says Azrael was such an interesting experiment in a replacement with hard religious values. Glad Bruce realized he didn't prep him and helped Valley later. Yeah, I mean, Azrael is an interesting one. There's a lot of religious imagery in those stories. I think Denny O'Neil came from a Catholic background, and that certainly finds a lot of that stuff finds its way into the Azrael comics. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, Ryan Young saying that's what I like about him. I hate trying to explain myself to people. I would say that's probably why young men like Batman, because he's so masculine, he's so male. But I think how can I say, the struggle that he's got is going 100% autist, I guess. Like, and the other characters are always trying to stop him going like 100% autist. Yeah. Mark Antonio, thoughts on Scott Snyder as a writer? I've got Court of the Owls, but not read it. I read his American Vampire series some time ago and rated it. Yeah, I don't mind. I don't mind the Scott Snyder stuff, to be honest. I think it's a very good run. Yeah, I thought. Other thoughts about New 52 aside, I think that Court of the Owls story is really good. Yeah. Would think Gotham is based on the city of Chicago or Detroit or New York City? I think. I mean, Gotham in the actual world is in New Jersey, but I think New York City has had a nickname, Gotham. So I think the implication is that it's a city like New York. That's always been the implication, that it's a city like New York. Yeah. Thoughts on the Oracle as a character? I actually really like the Oracle as a character. I think she's needed. I think that Batman needs to have people to play off, and Barbara Gordon Oracle. I mean, she's a nice, like, she's a nerd, like she's a geek character. So, and in many stories, she's actually the point of view character. She is sometimes they have the boxes explaining things. It's often Oracle who we approach the story from through her eyes. So she's actually quite a useful one to have there. I don't know how they'd manage to logistically coordinate all of the other elements if she wasn't there as the go-between. So yeah, I think Oracle is very useful for all sorts of reasons for the writers. But I like her as well. I think she's. I mean, there are some interesting moments when Huntress takes over as Batgirl. She is fucking furious because, of course, she was the first Batgirl, and she obviously can't be Batgirl now because she doesn't have legs anymore. She can't use her legs. She's absolutely devastated by that. On top of that, she's got a thing for Nightwing. She's got a thing for Dick Grayson, but Huntress also has a thing for Dick Grayson, and so there's like a double. It's like a double whammy where not only has she got the suit, that she's got the guy as well. She's got the man. So she has a lot of like pent up bitterness and rage in her as well, which she's an interesting character. She is an interesting character. And she's a sympathetic character too. And she's good. She's resourceful, I would say. Um, yeah, and Oracle is a better character than Batgirl. I agree with that. I agree. Uh, yeah. Um, what's the darkest story in the comics, in your opinion? I mean, Killing Joke is pretty dark, I have to say. The weirdly, tonally, the story where Jason Todd is killed, the Death in the Family story, is not that dark because it's got like Joker going off to Iran to be like the UN. It's a really silly story. So it's not that. I have to say that there are elements of No Man's Land that are extremely dark, extremely dark. It just goes on a bit. I think it just goes on a bit too long. But that whole arc where Joker kills Gordon's wife and takes all those little babies and things is sick. It really is. So yeah, but there's lots of dark ones. There's lots of dark ones. Uh, what else? Who created Batman? Well, I think it's well known that it was co-created by Bob Kane and Bill Finger together. Bill Finger did the writing, but Bob Kane did the artwork, and then I think that, so the story goes, Bob Kane was stretched too thin to continue working on all the different books, so most of the work on the Golden Age Batman was done by Bill Finger and Dick Sprang as the team. Bill Finger did the writing, Dick Sprang did the artwork. James Carter's given £2 for the Andrew Marvell stream. What else? Who is the most delusional villain? That's a very interesting question. I mean, there are some like really wacko villains. Like, what about Maxi Zeus, who believes he's a Greek god? Maxi Zeus believes he's literally Zeus, and he gets I mean, he's another D-lister, to be honest, but he gets like electrified lightning bolts made up for him to throw. He's just an idiot, basically. Two-Face is pretty mad. I would say he's very compulsive, Two-Face. But delusional. That's an interesting question. I mean, they're all mad in different ways. You see, I mean, Ventriloquist is a very pathetic and sad character because he believes it's the puppet telling him what to do all the time, and he's so sad and pathetic that there's a little arc where during the No Man's Land, all of the villains are put into jail and kept there by lockup on Batman's orders. And we see Ventriloquist in jail. Scarface has been destroyed, the original puppet. And so he has this, he has a little Socko puppet. And now it's Ventriloquist and Socko. So this guy is like so pathetic. He can't even, even in prison, he has like this sock puppet telling him what to do. So that's pretty sad. Yeah. Who is the most pathetic villain? It's got to be Clue Master, Arthur Brown, or Killer Moth. They're made to seem pathetic a lot of the time. Yeah. Who else? Who else? I mean, another pathetic villain is Catman. Catman is pretty weak, to be honest. There's a really cool, I can't remember exactly where it is, right? But there's a cool story where there's a group of like henchmen comparing notes on like who the best villains are to work for. You know, so they're like saying, "Oh, like Joker's hard to work for because he's fucking mental and he could kill you, but it's a good payday. He pays well, you know." But they all basically agree that the Penguin is the best guy to work for. Penguin is the best boss, but these guys are sitting around talking, and they say they want to work for Catwoman though. So Catwoman's pretty good to work for as well. So yeah. What else? Who is the sanest villain? I mean, that's pretty easy. It's the Penguin. The Penguin is super duper sane. He's always looking to make money. Basically, there's a very funny story in that resurrection night where all of the basically Ra's al Ghul busts everybody out of Arkham, and he offers them like a massive payday, but Joker goes rogue because he's the Joker, and Penguin's like, you're not gonna ruin this payday for me, Joker, and tries to kill him. They try to have Joker killed in that story. So yeah, yeah. I'm trying to think of other sane villains. Yeah. You will love working for Poison Ivy. You don't have any say in them. I mean, she'll kill you, of course. Penguin was not in Arkham. I don't know. Like just for that storyline, Penguin was with them. Trying to remember exactly what it was. Which version of the Joker origin is the best one? I don't think it matters really. I think the best version is the one that we don't really know, to be honest. Yeah, Mr. Zazz. I mean, Mr. Zazz is dark, but he's not delusional. He knows exactly what he is. He's a killer. Yeah. Just having a look at different questions. I'm scrolling up a little bit. Batman is the most delusional. I mean, there's an argument to say that. Humpty Dumpty is just sad. It's just sad. Are you going to do a stream dedicated to the best waifus of Batman? I mean, I could do some rankings if you want. You know, Vicky Vale, Silver St. Cloud, Talia. I mean, it's got to be Talia, hasn't it? It's actually a little bit. I think it's a bit tired. Every Ra's al Ghul story has Talia knocking around. She's loyal to her dad. She serves the demon, but she wants to bang Batman. Like Ra's has worked out that the only man fit to marry his daughter is Bruce Wayne, Batman. He wants the genes basically, but she won't marry. He won't marry her because she's a criminal. So yeah, in terms of like love interest, it's got to be Talia. I think that in terms of female sidekicks, it's Oracle without doubt. Yeah, just looking up economic analysis of the No Man's Land era. Yeah, I mean they essentially revert to a. I mean, Penguin works out that in the No Man's Land, everyday items go up in value and luxury items go down in value. So, yeah. Have you read Black Mirror? If that's that collection of Silver Age stories from the Grant Morrison run, yes, I have read that. How strong are Lovecraftian themes in Batman? I don't think they're that strong because they tend to play down the supernatural elements. The most Lovecraftian era of Batman is the early to mid 90s when Doug Mensch and Kelly Jones are on. Kelly Jones has got a very stylized way of drawing Batman, and they have a lot of supernatural stories, like horror stories, which are Lovecraftian, identifiably Lovecraftian. I'm not a fan of the Kelly Jones artwork. I mean, some people love it. I don't really like it, to be honest. I like kind of classic Jim Aparo style or Neil Adams style Batman. So those artists who are closest to that in the modern era are my favorite artists. Like I like the Graham Nolan who worked with Chuck Dixon. I like his Batman. Yeah, anytime where it's just like kind of classic Jim Aparo style, or Neil Adams style, if you want. Who is the dumbest Batman villain? That's a good question. You think about it. I mean, your mind goes to Killer. Like what I was saying, Killer Croc is not that thick, though. Have a look at Batman's villains. I mean, I'll soon tell you. Probably Tweedledee and Tweedledum. The weird thing is about there are a pile of villains who just like never actually have any capers or anything. Like Tweedledee and Tweedledum are just like in the background. They never actually like do any crimes, you know. But you know they're pretty thick. Humpty Dumpty's pretty thick. I'm just looking through now. I mean, I don't think Poison Ivy is like a super high IQ or anything. You know, she's pretty one-noted a lot of the time. She's just like a child of nature, you know. Solomon Grundy. He's not really a Batman villain, though. Solomon Grundy. Yeah, I'll stick with saying I'll stick with my original answer, whatever I said. So let's carry on. Just scrolling up. He doesn't spank her. No, he didn't spank the female Robin. Stephanie Brown was the best Robin. No, she wasn't. She was shite. I think Tim Drake is the best. Has the best stories, or he is the Robin during the most memorable run. I hate that the Bat Family has a revolving door. I mean, the Bat Family was quite solid for almost like a decade, and then they really went through them in the noughties. In the 90s, it was very well established, and then in the to use pro wrestling parlance, they started hot-shotting them. You know, when from about the time when Cassandra Cain comes in to the end of the decade, they start hot-shotting Bat Family. I agree with that. Yeah. What else? Favorite era of Batman. I actually have a little spot. I have a soft spot for the era just before the post-crisis, like the early to mid 80s. I think that's super underrated, that run, and it's not very well collected. Like Gene Conway, and Gene Nolan, I think their names are. That sort of era. I don't know if it's my favorite, but I think it's super underrated. A lot of that material. Because the 70s, the Bronze Age stuff gets a lot of hype, right? The Dennis O'Neil, Neil Adams, Steve Englehart, and Marshall Rogers. But I'm not. The trouble with Dennis O'Neil, even though he's a legend, is that he's a massive liberal, and he's always sneaking in little like social justice messages and things, like not social justice, more like kind of just like 1970s Democrat talking points, basically, like Democrat talking points. I don't like that about the Dennis O'Neil stuff. And I also think that for a period of time, he's in like that Batman, that Bronze Age Batman, when he's going out with Silver St. Cloud, is in a penthouse. He doesn't stay in Wayne Manor. He stays in a penthouse. Um, and there's a bit like it's a bit cheesy, some of that stuff, for my tastes. But mid the early to mid 80s, where it's Gene Colan, or Jerry Conway, that era uh, has got quite a lot of interesting tales in it. I also like the late 80s. But for me, my favorite era is when you've got Doug Mensch on Batman, Chuck Dixon on Detective, and Alan Grant on Shadow of the Bat. That era, probably from Nightfall to No Man's Land until they all leave. There's a decade of solid stuff there. You can actually bring it back a little bit. So let's just say from 1988 to about 1999 is, I think, probably the strongest Batman stuff. Because some of the later stuff, they start going wild for like star writers and all of that sort of stuff. But I don't like it when the writer is the star rather than the story. Um, and from the Grant Morrison stuff I've read, it's like, yeah, but this is all very like Grant Morrison in your face type stuff. I don't like that. Which is not like, I haven't read the main Morrison stuff, but the Morrison stuff I've read to date, I've always thought, yeah, but this is like you. I'm getting Morrison. I'm not getting Batman. I'm also not that big on Frank Miller for the same reason. Everybody raves about Frank Miller. I'm like, I'm hearing Frank Miller here, not like, just when you're reading those three, Mensch, Grant, and Dixon, you're getting the material. You're not getting them. You're not their personality is not in your face. Whereas in the noughties, I feel like a lot of these writers are kind of showy offy writers in a way. That said, there are good writers in the noughties. I like Greg Rucka. Greg Rucka writes some of the best issues of No Man's Land. I like that New Gotham volume 1 and 2. Yeah, kind of stylized art on that, but that doesn't bother me. I don't really care about that. The writing is strong from Rucker, so I don't mind him. Ed Brubaker's not that bad. But when it and I like Paul Dini when he comes into the comics, and when Grant Morrison was on Batman, Paul Dini was on Detective Comics, and I've got his run here in a omnibus. But I read a lot of that years ago, and I enjoyed that as well. So, but I tend not to like the star writers. They are too much. I'm the same with Alan Grant as well. It's not Alan Grant, Alan Moore. I don't like it when the writer is imposing their personality on the universe. They should subsume their personality and dissolve into the world of Batman, not, you know, not having like Batman as a vehicle to work out their issues type thing. I don't like that. It's a liberal. That's a kind of liberal trope, I think. And unfortunately, Dennis O'Neill. I actually prefer Dennis O'Neill as an editor than I do as a writer, because Dennis O'Neill does a bit of that as well. Like, there's a story called Venom where Batman gets addicted to like Bane's venom juice or whatever it is. And this was clearly like Dennis O'Neill working out his own issues with addiction and all that. It's just like, is Batman the place to be for the writer to be working out their issues? Don't think so. You know what I mean? So yeah, I don't like I don't like the superstar writer very, very much. Yes. People saying Tom King's run is bad. I haven't read that, I'm afraid. Is AA lobbying for Priti Patel to play Catwoman in the next film? No, her ass is way too big to play Catwoman. Priti Patel has a massive rear end. Have you read The Batman Who Laughs? Wasn't that a Chuck Dixon story? I can't remember now. No, that was the Joker Who Laughs. So, yes. Who is the thickest female character? The thickest female character. I think it's that Lex Luthor sidekick, Mercy. Open Mercy. She's thick. See if I can find her. Find her in the comics. Hold on. Lex Luthor's she's an absolute bitch as well. But she's pretty thick, I think. Depends who draws her, I suppose. But let me just show you. When she turns up, she really does kick some ass. Where is she? I can't get a good shot of her now. None of these are very good shots of her. Is it Hope and Mercy? That's Hope. Anyway, maybe it's not who. But probably the thickest character is that butch prisoner who was beating up that one who goes to prison. Yeah. Oh, what else? Was there not a pharaoh who got into hijinks a lot? Are you thinking of King Tut? King Tut was in the 66 series. Yeah. Who is the twinkiest Robin? It really depends on who draws him. To be honest, because sometimes Robin is drawn like he's kind of pretty much a young man. Other times he's drawn like he's almost like a kid, So it really depends on the artwork there. In general, probably Tim Drake, but Tim Drake. I mean, the thing is that these characters have love lives and they're all straight. So I don't really buy the Robin is gay meme. What sort of thick do you want? What the Batman's greatest villain is lib writers. Yeah, I'd agree with that. Can't really think of any other. Let me have a think. Who's that? Hold on. Let's have a look at Huntress a minute. I think Huntress has got a bit of gas in the tank, as it were. Let's just have a look at it. Sometimes when again, it depends on who draws these characters, but sometimes Huntress is. I mean, obviously none of them are porky or anything, but yeah, maybe Huntress. It depends on who draws these characters, though. So yeah, she's more muscular than anything. So yep. If there's no more questions, I will. Yeah, Huntress is more thick, I would say. Huntress. It really depends. I mean, the 90s Catwoman is definitely curvy, I would say. Whereas Huntress, yeah. Okay. All right, I think that'll do. I'll go off and eat something, and I'll be back for. Let's have a shot at Huntress. Hold on. What do you reckon? She's all right. Okay, so I'll be back later on for Nuts in May. And there is Talia, of course, Talia Al-Ghul. Hold on, let's have a look at Talia Al-Ghul. Let's have a look at her. I mean, she's the most likely to get a kit off, I would say, in any given story, because they tend to like have it off whenever she's around. She's very much a spoiled brat, though, is Talia. I like the way she talks to minions and things. She's very entitled, is Talia. So I mean, here's a shot of her. There's Talia. What do you reckon? Yeah. So, all right. Hope you enjoyed this. I'll be back later on with Frody on Decameron Film Festival. Reminder, yes, again, that my new book is out, Populist Delusion. If you don't catch me on Decameron, I'm back on Unpopular Opinions tomorrow night. You can also buy a course using Easter 25. But now get out.